Hi, I'm Vicki Hoth from Handi Quilter, and we are in the Handi Quilter studio. And one of the big questions of the day that we see a lot is, how do I reposition my design on my quilt after I have shut my machine down and had to leave for the day, and now I come back and think, now how do I get things lined back up? So we're going to do a little tutorial on this today so that you can figure this out as well. So first thing we want to do is look at our quilt and say, okay, there's enough space probably here that I can get one more row in. But since I'm advancing and having to reposition, I might as well give myself a full throat space. And I'm on the infinity, so I have a big throat space to get a lot of these rows done before I advance. So let's give us some good space to quilt. So I'm going to take my clamps off, release the clamps, and Carrie's going to help me on the other end. You won't be able to see her, but she's going to help me on the other end, so I get to stay here. She's taking the clamps off, and she's going to go ahead and advance the quilt so that I have enough throat space here to get 3 or 4 more rows in. So I'm just going to help you a little bit, making sure the batting is straight. A little bit more, Carrie. That's good. Thank you. You're going to put those clamps back on. Now, one of the things that I like to do, because I can see right here, my batting is a little wrinkly, and so I like to pop off the pole here and actually just help smooth out that batting along the way. And so Carrie's going to do the other side of it. This is a really large quilt. And so Carrie's going to help me on the other side. And I know you can't see her, but she really is here. Carrie's one of my studio educators. And so now I've got everything smooth under there, looking good. And I'm going to go ahead and put that pole back on. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is put my clamps back on. I always want to have the proper tension on the quilt. So go ahead and put the clamps back on, and then making sure I need to stitch down this side of the quilt. So those are things that we need to do to prepare ourselves to have the best quilting experience and to make the quilt look really good. So I'm going to go ahead. I have my glide foot on, and that helps just glide over the fabric so I don't have any issues. I'm quilting less than 1/4 inch along the edge of the quilt. Okay, and go ahead. And I do have the infinity, so I could have clipped that bobbin thread, but you know, I am so used to doing it the other way that I forget, but someday I'll remember this. All right, now I am ready to take my design and place it correctly on the pattern, or on the quilt. But first of all, I need to bring the design in, and I have saved this because I shut down and went home, and so I need to bring that back up. And I can do it by pressing the open button, but the other thing that's really nice is I can go to recent, and it will be the last design that I used yesterday. So I'm right at the top, repeat alternating loops, and there it is. There's my design. Now with this quilt, every row is the same. And so I can choose the start point of the previous row as a positioning point. But if every row was not the same, and I had some cropping at the top, then I would want to choose row 2, 3, 4, another row. So it doesn't matter that I've done 10 rows and I start again at row 1 or row 2, because they're all the same and I can just work my way down the quilt. Okay, so I am going to go over, and I have advanced this maybe a little too far than, well, maybe not. I'm going to be fine. We'll just do this. So what I want to do is I'm going to count over on my quilt 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 of these little loops here. Now they're loops, they're not points. I could have not advanced the quilt quite as far and used one of the points here as a positioning point. So maybe I'll do that. Carrie, if you will release that. I'm going to just give myself a little bit more. That's good. Okay. We'll tension things back up. Now my machine can get to one of these points. And that's a good place to reference to on the screen. So I can see right there, that's where I want to put my design back up. So again, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, that's a good one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the screen and I'm going to find that 6th loop over. So just a reference point, and I'm going to drag it over here so that I can get it closer to my crosshair. I could have just moved my machine over, but then Jenny would have had to follow me on the camera. This way, I just did it all on my screen, okay? Now I'm going to press the follow button, and I'm going to zoom in. So it's going to follow where I put the crosshair as I zoom in. It's going to hold that. Okay, now as I zoom in, I can look at this in big form and see it. And again, I'm going to count over 6. I could do the start point, but I think I'm just going to go in to the design and position it at a point on the design. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops and come up to that point. As you saw, as I pointed to on the quilt, I am going to put my crosshair there. So if I look at this and I put my crosshair over at loop 1, there is loop 2. The crosshair is where it crosses, and that represents where my needle. There's loop 2, loop 3, loop 4, loop 5, and loop 6. Now there's no magic number. Excuse me. 6. The 6th loop doesn't mean that that's what I always have to do. I just know that if I find loop 6 on my screen, then I can take that and place it on loop 6 on the fabric, and I can just match them up, drop it down, and I'm good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and move my crosshair up to that point that I pointed to on the fabric, and now I want to press my drag button. The drag grabs a hold of that point on the screen. So my crosshair has a hold of that, and it's going to, as I move the machine now, it's going to go with me. So as I move, I'm going to find that same 6th loop on my fabric. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I want it to be up here. So if I move my needle up to that point, it moved my design on the screen with me. We stayed together, and now I've married them up. I've matched them. They are all, both together, but I need to let go of the design. So I'm going to press the drop button, and it let go of it in exactly the position I need to have it positioned on the quilt. So as I move this design away and I check, I don't want to stitch that row because it's already been stitched. I want to stitch the next row. So I can go over to the start point of the next row, and this is where it is, and that looks good. But I can do some spot checking. I can come up here at the top, and it looks right centered exactly where it should be. Again here, and you can go all the way across your quilt or different spots across the quilt and check that. I'm going to go over here a few and right where it should be. So I'm really happy with that. I could go right to the end if I wanted and check that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and press my refresh button, and that puts the design on the whole screen. So I'm not zoomed in anymore. I'm seeing the whole design. My green bullet is at the stop, or the green bullet is at the very first row. That's not where I want to be. So if I go over here where I know I want to be, I can see, oh, I need that green bullet to move down. So I go to quilt, press the quilt button, press new start end, and now I want to move my start point down one row. And so what I need to do is, on the start point, there are some jump point arrows a forward arrow and a backward arrow. So I want it to go forward. So if I press the forward arrow, it will move the jump point down a jump, which means a jump is a whole row. So that's one row, and then it jumps to the next row. I need it to jump to row 2, or the row that I have right here. So I just press that arrow, and it moved down, and it's ready to quilt. So I have all my settings. So I'm going to do pull up my thread, do my start or my tie-offs, and I'm ready to start quilting. So press run, proceed. It will move up where it needs to be. Take a pull-up stitch, move that back, resume, and it's going to go ahead and start. I keep mine on about a medium speed for this. There are not any points, they're all curves, so it's going to run really smooth. If you had a design that had a lot of points to it, you'd want to slow your speed down a little bit so that it was more accurate. But it's good to go, and we're going to stitch the next row.